and our call-in number is 563-999-3581. However, we have got a big project going on right now, and so I'm actually going to play a repeat of a show where Michael worked with Yinka. And so this is part one of that. And so I hope you enjoy, and we will talk to you tomorrow.
One of the things I found really hard to kind of grasp is how can you go your whole life carrying that a belief?
Yeah.
And not notice it, not know it's even that you're making a decision. Because it's like, if somebody told me that's what I was thinking, I would have said no, don't. But actually seeing it in myself is like, oh, that's what I think.
Yeah. Well, if you go back into the ancient teachings, they said, take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life. It wasn't take care of the head, and the heart is the unconscious. There's a gentleman that I worked with, this goes back 30 years ago, and he was an ophthalmologist. And he had a system of lights that he would use to go, he would use the light to go into the eye and to impact and stimulate a part of the brain. It was a very powerful treatment. And his take as an ophthalmologist was that there are enough connections possible in a single human mind to match the number of connections possible would match the number of molecules in the known universe. Not the number of grains of sand on a beach in Florida or Florida in Africa and South America. The number of molecules in the known universe is possible in one mind. Harvard research says that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, 10,000 units of electrical activity are happening, we get in our conscious awareness a thing called perception. We only get 9 bits.
Mm-hmm.
So having a way to drop into the underlying hidden part, to me, is the most important skill that somebody could have, because nobody knows what's controlling their lives, and everybody's trying to figure it out. Penance Intensive Workshop, I go through what I call the pseudo-solutions of the non-being mind. And the number one pseudo-solution is, if I could just figure this out. And you can't figure it out. But you could do exactly what you just did, Yinka, and you can drop into it. And it doesn't necessarily, it usually takes some time, and it takes some willingness to really become cognizant of what it is you're touching into. Like, you got that clear memory. You had the brain cells to be able to get that. Somebody doesn't even need to be to that stage where they're fully cognizant of, what that memory is. All they need to do, and that's why, several times in worksheets, we remind people to breathe. Before you go into the core of the forgiveness process and canceling the goal, we ask you to connect powerfully to the active presence of love. If you're breathing and love is present and you're holding a smile on your face, then that energy is going to move. And you may not even be cognizant of what just moved, but it'll move, and watch your life change.
Mm-hmm.
So nice piece of work, Yinka. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. In 2 miles. Yeah, it made me realize when you talk about trying to find the answer outside yourself and the answer is inside, it was like I realized that I could see that I was trying to get everybody to see me, kind of hear me, I'm here. And it was like, no, I just wanted me to recognize me, not this search of looking outside of myself and relationships and the things that I did. It was like, it was never out there. And it's not until you actually see it in yourself that you realize what somebody's saying. Like, I hear you say it, but I don't see it. But now I can actually see it in myself.
Right. Beautiful. There's a young lady here in the States that actually for several years did a radio show after she had done this forgiveness work. She'd been to Heartland and done intensive. And her radio show was, "There's no out there."
Yeah. So I'll start with the questions that I've got from other people.
Please, let's go for it, Yinka.
And then if anybody else wants to ask a question, if you click on raise your hand, and then once I've gone through the questions people have sent me, I'll go through the raised hands but Maggie is first because she did message me. So you won't have to raise your hand.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I'll read these ones out. I've wrote them on a scruffy piece of paper, so that'll be me and writing. Oh, there's a lot of different worksheets. Which one is best to do? What's best to start with? Which is most recent?
Well, my offering would be that we have a simple 3-step short form that we print on the back of a bookmark. That can, the core of the process is there, and just can you give me 1 second?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I had some interference there, excuse me. So, and then there's the most current worksheet, which is the one we publish on the website as the #1 worksheet, is a 7-step. And that's the one, if people want to go to depth each time, that I suggest using. And it's something that's been in development for 40 years. And if you look on the website, you'll see there are, I don't even know how many we publish there. Do you know, Jeannie, about how many different worksheets are published on? Probably 20 or 25 on the website. And each one of them has been a test of how do we get to the core of what the issues are. And so what I've found, or the feedback I've gotten from people who've really practiced that and used the worksheet, is that if they, so again, what I suggest people do is go through and take the ones that really appeal to you. There are different ideas in each worksheet and practice with each of them. And there's several people who've told me that they've found it beneficial to rotate. They'll do a certain worksheet for a week or two, and then they'll shift to one of the others. And they'll shift because each one has got a slightly different flavor, and each one goes to a slightly different place. And there are actually 7 different children's worksheets. And I've had a lot of adults who've tried to do the adult worksheet and go, it's just, it does something. And they start off with the children's worksheet, and right down to the simplest one, and they start to click with it, and then work into the adult worksheet. So I guess the full answer would be practice, practice, practice.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. I've not been doing the worksheets. Can I still benefit from the work, and how do I encourage myself to do it? Or how do I get myself to do it? So they've asked, they've not been doing the worksheets, can they still benefit from the work? And how do they get themselves to do it?
Well, every piece of awareness that we allow ourselves to step into, we're going to benefit from it. So you use the tools or don't use the tools, but my input would be to discipline yourself to maybe at least do 1 worksheet a day. And one of the reasons why, in my experience, people don't want to do worksheets is, Yinka, exactly what you just shared was, you touched into something that was pretty deep. And when it happened, it was pretty devastating. And when people get the intuitive sense that that's where they're going, a lot of times they're like, well, I don't want to go there. My input for the person who does that, and again, that can be an unconscious decision, but my input is, you don't have to be aware of the painful experience to be in pain from it. Actually, a lot of the behaviors of our culture are anesthetics that people use in order to hide their pain from themselves. And so, but the benefit is when I allow myself, when I'll do the work, when I'll use the worksheet, and I allow myself to go there, I can free myself from my unconscious pain, the pain I didn't even know was there. It's not that by avoiding it, I escape it. It's just that I experience it as deteriorating my physiology if I never look at it. there's that old saying that says, the brave or the coward dies 1,000 deaths, the brave only one. I go look at it once, and yeah, it's intense and it's painful, but once I move through it, I'm finished with it. If I never go look at that, my structure is suffering from it 24/7, 365, and ultimately, literally, on a physiological level, when you think of the body as energy, it's literally the stuff that kills us. So that would be my encouragement for you. And yes, of course, each new piece of awareness gained, there's going to be benefit to it.
Yeah. We did have someone on this morning who said that they saw us that they're making themselves suffer even more by doing the sheet. And then I was explaining like that when you were saying about going through it, it's the suffering that you're going through, at least it stops. Whereas if you continue with the belief you've got, the suffering's going to continue. But I don't know if you would word it differently.
Well, it is a process for sure. Mm-hmm. And the deeper you engage, the more the benefits are going to be.
Somebody's asked, does the same apply for all religions? Because they're not Christian. They're Muslim.
This is not a Christian process. It's got nothing to do with Christianity. It happened to come out of the teachings of this man Yeshua from 2,000 years ago. But it's like, the analogy I would use is, so I'm a carpenter, and I'm a Christian carpenter, and I made a hammer. Does that mean I'm the only one in the world that can use a hammer or benefit from a hammer, and it won't be of any use to anyone else? No, that of course is silly. It's got, sadly, many of the most powerful teachings, whether it's been from Baha'u'llah, whether it's been from Muhammad, whether it's been from Yeshua, whether it's been from, the Hindu perspective, has been turned into a religious idea when it's not. It's just, here are the tools, here's how it works, and it works equally for everyone. If I'm going to build a house, I need a hammer and a saw and a level and a square, and there's no such thing as a Muslim hammer and a Christian square and it's just, here are the tools, that's all. And everything that I teach comes, here's how you make it work. And it doesn't matter who you are. You can go kicking and screaming, I don't believe a word that this Michael Ryce says. That's okay. Just use the tool and your life will change. You can say, I don't believe that a hammer could drive in a nail, but if I put it in my hand and I pound the nail's going to go in. That's all. You don't have to believe anything of it. Not a thing.
Thank you. I'm just seeing the sheet. This is a question that's not necessarily on the worksheet, but she's put, every time she decides to eat less, more food just shows up and she loses herself. So it's not necessarily to do the worksheet, but maybe she needs to do a worksheet on it.
It sounds like some food worksheets would be good, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a part of her unconscious keeps tempting her.
Yeah. Because she said if she was a lot of food just shows up every time she decides she's going to eat less. How would you start the worksheet? Would you start it on?
I would start it on food, or it might be a worksheet on myself. If I find that, I want to eat more than I know is healthy for me, then the worksheet might be on me. So I'd put my name in number 1C, and, the situation might be I overeat. And the goal might be I want to be in control of my appetite. Or it might be when I'm in pain, I find myself going to the refrigerator. The goal might be, to cover my pain with food. So it could be 1,000 variations on a theme. And the more, and this is one of the reasons why you might do the same worksheet more than once, the more accurately you identify a goal and you get to the precise goal that's the key in this particular situation, the more powerfully that perceptual construct of the moment that holds pain is going to collapse in on itself. And the more powerfully it collapses in on itself, the deeper you get to reach into that hidden part of the mind and clean out the garbage.
That goes into the next question, actually, because somebody put, do you do the worksheet for every emotion and separately for thoughts? or just one per situation?
Well, what I suggest that you do is, if you find yourself, I've got this thing going on and my mind is telling me that I'm angry and sad and afraid. So I'm going to do a worksheet on anger. I'm going to do a worksheet on sadness. I'm going to do a worksheet on fear around that situation. So each one is separate. And here's the reason. Literally, when you realize that perception is a construct of the mind, the world has taught us we have eyes and we see out there. And that's just the silliest lie that's ever been told. Nobody has ever seen anything in the world, ever, and you never will. We have eyes, yes. We have an antenna that receives light energy. That light energy brings information into the brain, and according to the frequencies of light that come into the brain, information stored in the brain is resonated, is set into activity. The energy that's set into activity is basically thought. And so if I have a particular event that happens and the light that comes in conveys something to my brain literally constructs what I think I see out there. I don't see with my eyes. I mean, the eye is a one-way valve. You can't see out of it. Information comes into it. Thinking that you can see out of your eye is about as silly as thinking that you could take the antenna off the back of your TV and look in it and see out through the antenna up on top of the roof. You can't see out of the antenna. And so we've been taught this false idea that we see things, when the truth is our seeing happens with our brain. And so if a particular event resonates thought disorders that result in me having fear, thought disorders that result in me having hostility, thought disorders that result in me having sadness. Now I say I'm sad because I saw that, I'm afraid because I saw that, and I'm angry because I saw that. The truth is, no, I have anger, I have fear, I have sadness. And I'm feeling that because that's what's in me. And this event, the information that came in, resonated those thought disorders, and those thought disorders literally energetically. We have this amazing device. Our mind takes thoughts and turns them into pictures. This may not wholly apply in some of the other countries that are participating, but I don't know, maybe 15 years or so ago, the broadcast system in America was what they called analog broadcast. And analog means that, let's say channel 2, channel 4, channel 6, each of them has, from an energetic perspective, a physics perspective, it has an energetic signature, a wave that carries information. So channel 2 has a particular frequency, channel 4, channel 6. And what they used to do here in America is they would then superimpose images, pictures, on that carrier wave. So the TV antenna receives that carrier wave, and it kind of like lifts out, or it decodes the pictures, and it shows the pictures on the screen. So the picture that's included in the carrier wave is now showing up on the screen. So this is the TV's ability to decode. Well, back, I don't even know how many years ago, 20 or so years ago, they decided that all broadcasts in America were going to be required by law to be digital, all TV broadcasting. So they got rid of these analog signals that contained pictures, and they made them signals that contained information, digital information. And so people had to go out and buy new TVs. If they wouldn't go out and buy new TVs, the government passed a law. You had to keep everybody in the loop of the TV brainwash. They passed a law that if people didn't have a television that could decode the new digital signals, the government would buy you one. And you would install it on your old analog TV, hook it up, and now when the new broadcasting system came out, you'd still be able to watch television because the decoder would convert that signal. And that's exactly what happens in the mind. Energetic patterns in the mind, thoughts, literally, the mind has the ability to convert them into pictures. digital images, excuse me, are converted into analog images, pictures. And so if I recognize I have a perceptual construct, an image in my mind that has these kinds of traumas or upsets in them, then I want to dissolve each one that I can identify. And that's why I want to do a different worksheet around every feeling, a different worksheet around every thought. Because when I pull that piece of the signal out, that's when the resulting perception that seems so hard and so strong and so fixed and so real about out there, that's when it collapses in on itself, and I get to free myself from it. I get to loose from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Just because it's, somebody's put it on here, just because it was in relation to the emotions. What if I do not know how to describe the emotions? Mean do not understand myself.
Okay, so you'll notice that there's a little box on the worksheet that says draw it. Sometimes these are pre-verbal things. You know, I've had people who've gone back and have memories in the womb. They didn't have language. And so that's why we put, you know, from experience, that's why we put that little box in there that draw your feelings. Because oftentimes there are no words for those feelings. It was pre-verbal. Or it's maybe genetic and there's no recall of it, no way to put it into words. But that's where you got a place and you start to create, you know, the silliest visual drawing, and all of a sudden, click, something moves. Energetically, something moves. And that's what we're looking to do, is to get whatever that is that has been held. And sometimes these thought disorders may be 10 generations old. When we really trace them back, when we really key into them. And when I'm able to pull them up and allow them to come forward in the presence of breath and the active presence of love, they come undone. I don't have to figure them out. They come undone. That's the magic of actual first century Aramaic forgiveness.
Thank you.
You are most welcome.
Another question. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's what I don't want to punish. I think it must be on that punish part. It's what I don't want to punish.
I'll say that over the last 40 years of developing this, one of the most common comments in a live workshop that I get on the worksheet is, yeah, well, I don't have any punishment thoughts. Oh, okay, well, what is it you want to do? Oh, I just want to leave. No punishment thoughts, but I want to leave. You know what the most disastrous punishment you can do to somebody is isolate them. But in a culture where leaving is part of the culture, to me, like one of the major things that needs to be healed on the planet is this whole issue of leaving. It's like it's become so ingrained in our psyche that we think leaving. I mean, if you think about yourself and an experience of being abandoned, how horrendous that was, and you say, well, I don't have punishment, I just want to abandon them, I just want to leave them. You know, yeah, there's punishment there. 99.99999% of the time, there's punishment. And I may not be in touch with it, so I maybe just mark it unconscious, unaware. Yes, I want to leave. Okay. So, you know, what they've shown is in prisons, when they put people in isolation in prisons, they go nuts. They go literally crazy because they can't handle the isolation. That's one of the most horrendous punishments there is. Which is a pretty sad commentary on punishment in America, because there's still prisons in America today, and I hate to acknowledge it or admit it, that were designed to keep prisoners in isolation. And they're still in operation, even they know exactly what they're doing. We've got lots of forgiveness to do on the planet around leaving, isolating, punishing.
That's a big one, that one.
It's major.
That one. think that's what's your religious background.
Say again?
If that's what's your religious background.
Mine?
Yeah.
My original upbringing was in the Christian world. And as I say, the focus of this work has come out of the first century Aramaic language and the teachings of Yeshua. People call him Jesus, but his name wasn't Jesus, it was Yeshua. And when I first came in touch with his teachings as an adult, my background was electronics with a side study in physics, and I was a naturopathic physician. And what I saw in it was, this isn't about theology. This is about psychology. This is about genetics. This is about physiology. This is about how this energy system called life works. The man was a physicist. He wasn't a theologian. And when you start looking at it from that perspective, it all just starts to make sense. And then you realize that each and every one of what are considered to be the religious figures, in truth, are really about, here's how the energy system works. Here's what I've discovered can help you clean it up. The more effective teachers of showing people how to clean up their lives have become have risen to the top. And my offering is, none of them in their essence were religious. It's just people who've discovered we are human beings. We are made of the stuff called love. All you have to do is hold a newborn to verify that for yourself. And we've lost it. How do we return? How do we get back to who we are as human beings? Well, the number one key is you got to get rid of what you're not. I think I may have shared it on one of the earlier shows, but there's a story about a tourist who's looking at the statue of David as Michelangelo was finishing, chiseling it out. And he looks at it and he's just like amazed. It's like, how did you do that? And Michelangelo just said, well, David was in that piece of granite all the while. All I did was remove everything that wasn't him. If you remove everything that isn't you from your genes, from your cultural programming, and from your own life, all that we left is your created essence, which is love, period. And we're all the same. It's the same with all of us. Some people have got terror and trauma and rage and hatred and vengeance and violence and viciousness and murder structured in them. So we say that's a murderer, and the truth is, that's someone who's killed. But the truth is, they're not a murderer. They're no different than you and I. They're made of the same stuff. And do people need to be punished for the terrible things they do? It's the most ridiculous thing. Like, we're on the punishment planet. One of my things here is to end this whole idea of punishment. People say, well, they did something terrible. Shouldn't they be punished? No. If you look at somebody who did something terrible, you've got somebody who was hurting. And hurting people hurt people. So let's see now. We're going to reform the world by taking the hurting people who've hurt people and hurt them more and see if we can fix the world. It's crazy on its face. Yes, there are people who need to be isolated from society. A murderer definitely needs to be isolated from society. Do they need to be punished? No. What they need is healing. If we're ever going to get to a planet where we function as human beings, then everything that's not human in us is going to have to be healed. That's all. And that means some pretty crazy stuff is going to have to be dealt with. It's going to have to come up. And so the idea of this work is to create a space where within ourselves, individually, within our family systems, within our own communities, wherever we are, and it doesn't matter whether it's a Muslim community or a Christian community or a Hindu community or a Sikh community, whatever communities we're in, can we function as human beings? And when we do, there's going to be peace in the world. Actually, there's going to be, if you go back into the ancient Aramaic, this statement where we're told, he said, my peace I bring to you. It wasn't that, it was my serenity. It's like we all have within us the source of the same serenity. But if we've got patterns of hate and fear and rage and guilt that are unresolved, then those things get in the way and they darken our experience, our perception of the moment. And we're here to support people cleaning it up, wherever they are, whoever they are, whatever they've got or whatever they don't have.
This is just a personal question that's come from about the punishment and thing that you just said before.
Right.
How do you know the difference when leaving is out of punishment or leaving is out of it's time to leave?
I think the difference is night and day. And the reason for that is that literally every thought we think creates an energy field. Back about 4 decades ago, I used to speak at a conference called Global Science. And one year, a gentleman named Marcel Vogel, who was a 23-year senior scientist from IBM, showed up at the conference. And he brought along a thing, I think I shared this in the last show, the Delaware camera, where he was able to, he showed us pictures of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. If I'm leaving out of vengeance and hatred and fear, and I'm conveying all of that to all the world. Guess who I'm going to probably move when I get, or meet when I get a mile down the road? I'm going to find somebody who's going to play out that vengeance and fear with me. If I get to the point where I recognize, you know, this relationship is complete, you want to live one way, which I'm not in agreement with, and I choose to live another. So I bless you, I honor you, I honor the time we've had together, and it's time for me to move on. Now I'm not leaving out of rage and fear, and I'm not sending out a literal high energy wave that asks the world to send me another abuser. It's like I'm ready to live in a space where I can create relationship that supports the truth of who I am, and where I'm here to support the truth of who you are. Now we've got a whole different thing. Energetically, the communication. I mean, there's nothing we know of in the physical world that can stop the high energy wave that leaves the mind when we think a thought. Everything we hold in us is communicated continuously. If what we hold in us, you know, when you think of physiology as an integrated energy system, relative to that energy system, there are energies which build the system up and energies which tear the system down. If there's a tear down energy in our energy system, then our physiology is deteriorating. Now, it's interesting, in the Aramaic language, the word that is used to describe the tear down energy is the word sin. And it's an archery term. When I fire at the bullseye and I miss the bullseye, the scorekeeper yells sin. You're off the mark. That's all that word means. Now, you look at the baggage that the religions have put on the word sin, and it's horrendous. When the truth is, it's just I'm engaging in energy that doesn't belong. Now, my offering is that if I engage in energy that doesn't belong, hate, fear, rage, guilt, you know, a system made for love is going to be torn down by those things. And so it seems that the way the creation is set up, accidental or otherwise, that if I'm in resonance with something that in alignment with pain and suffering, then I'm going to set up a high energy wave that's going to draw in somebody who's going to play out pain and suffering with me. When I decide to go inside and clean that up, I'm no longer sending out a literal high energy wave that draws that person to me, and then when they get here, I draw that out of them. I'm literally setting up a whole different energy field. And it doesn't matter in what arena I'm doing that. It doesn't matter if it's in relationship arena or financial arena. If the underlying thought is, I'll always be poor because I don't deserve anything, I could win the lottery tomorrow. In fact, they've done research on people who won the lottery, and people who are in dire poverty and dire straits, when they win the lottery, a year or two later are broke again. Doesn't matter, $100 million, it's gone. Because if one holds, I'm supposed to be in dire poverty, then they'll set up, you know, what do they need? They need this thief to come and take it, or they need to get greedy, or they need to get drunk, or, you know, whatever they need to do, they're going to produce that result. The idea of this work is that if I see that there's a pattern in me of producing a certain result, I can go to work and undo the underlying aspect of that pattern so I can go somewhere else, so I can live differently. Does it make sense?
Yes, definitely. One more question, and then I'll open it up for other people. because I do the worksheets quite often on people. How do you catch, I don't know if you'll be able to, but when people get distracted when you're doing the worksheet and they wander off and their attention wanders off, how do you catch them to bring them back to the worksheet? Because you tend to they get wander off into the story.
Right.
Talk about something else, or I've seen them get up and actually leave and do stuff and try and change the subject.
Right. You know, there are 1,000 ways that we've set up to try to avoid. And the mind, and you know, when I work with people directly on worksheets, what I focus on is bringing them back. In fact, we did a worksheet a couple of weeks ago, remember, and about 6 times we had to come back because the mind it's set up all kinds of distractions. And if you notice yourself being distracted, and that's one of the reasons why it can be really useful to do the worksheet in writing, is if you find yourself being distracted, it's easier to stay on track if you're putting it down in writing in front of you. I have people who'll say, oh, I just do the worksheets in my mind. And to that person, I have a little song I like to sing, and that is Neil Simon's Slip Sliding Away. You know, the nearer your destination, the more you slip sliding away. When people get closer to the core of their issues, that's when they want to turn and look the other way. 1,000 distractions. And I've seen it take people, when they start really moving some things and getting in touch with some things, I've seen them run away from this work, and I've seen it take 10 years for them to go back and say, tell me that again. I need to hear that again. That's just a part of, you know, the distractions that we put ourselves in.
Thank you.
There's an interesting video. I don't know how available it would be over there, but I'll just put it out there. I know that we can, I've bought a couple of copies to share with people on Amazon. It's called May I Be Frank. And it's a story about a restaurant actually in California. And it's called Cafe Gratitude. And in Cafe Gratitude, when you first come into the restaurant, they ask you a question. They've got a question of the day. And the question of the day on one particular day was, what do you want most of all? And this overweight New Jersey Italian gentleman was touched by the question, and he said, I just want to be loved again. And then went into a tirade about how nobody could ever love him because he's 100 pounds overweight and ugly and, you know, all of this. The 2 young men who were servers in that restaurant, one of them was, his father was the owner of the restaurant. These 2 young men kind of built a rapport with this man. They went back to Dad and said, Dad, we want to take this man on as a project and help him heal. And they ended up creating a video called May I Be Frank. And it's powerful because it shows, you know, in a very practical way, what everybody's going to go through. If you actually want to heal, everybody's going to have to do this. There's just no 2 ways about it. Everybody has got this kind of stuff to deal with. But there's one particular scene that, you know, you bring up when you ask that question. And that is that he really wants to get back into a relationship with his daughter. And he has a woman that when he was a younger man, he dearly loved. And, you know, between them, they just totally destroyed the relationship. And so it gets to the point where with the support of these 2 young men, he's really stepping in and doing his work. They end up flying his former wife out to California. And they're sitting in his living room having a conversation, you know, and it's like, oh, it's so sweet to see you and everything's so wonderful. And then they get into some of the issues. And I don't remember exactly what the issue is, but the conversation turns to an issue where he still is just loaded with rage. And it's powerful to watch. Let me back up a little bit. Earlier in the film, they show how they designed a contract with this man, and part of his commitment was he was only allowed to eat what they fed him from the restaurant. And they literally went into his house. They videoed doing this. They went into his house. They took all the garbage, all the drugs out of his refrigerator and freezer. And when I mean that, by that I mean all the meat and all the chemicals and just all the junk, all the sugar, caffeine took all of that out, and it's gone. And this guy is interacting with his wife, and this young man's moderating their discussion, and he goes into just a fit of rage, and he gets up off the couch and walks through to, and here's his habit, you can see his distraction. He walks through and opens the refrigerator door. And he looks in the refrigerator and he just closes it because he realizes all his drugs are gone. There's so many drugs in this culture, so many anesthetics that people use to distract themselves. And, you know, that's just part of the healing process. I wish there were a way to just snap a magic wand and, you know, have all that disappeared for everybody. But everybody's got to do their own process, and everybody's got to come to strengthen their minds to make new choices. Or actually, I shouldn't even say new choices. I should say it more accurately, it's to come out of old decisions and begin to make actual choices.
Thank you. That's really hit something for me as well.
Well, let me just take it one step further, just a little more of a demonstration of the principle. You know, the way what we call the mind works is the law of resonance. We talked about that before. The law of resonance says this: when two energy fields are in harmony with each other, when they're in tune with each other, there's an exchange of energy between them. So if I say to you, don't think about the color of your car, I set up a frequency with my voice. Now, the truth is, I've never said a word in my life, and neither of you. We call it saying words, but what it is actually is there's a little flap of skin in the back of our throat, and we've learned how to pass air over it to vibrate it to make these air molecules move, and we call the air molecules moving when they hit the ear a sound and words. But the truth is, I'm not saying words, I'm just vibrating a flap of skin. In fact, there's a good video where they had Mick Jagger hitting some of his high notes, and they've got a camera down his throat watching his voice box. It's amazing video on YouTube. So that vibration, that energetic pattern that we set up and call speaking, is nothing more than a frequency representing the thoughts in our minds. And as I recognize how that energetic system works, I realize that most of what I say I think is nothing but like the color of my car resonance, something from the past firing in brain cells. What's the front door of your house look like? Well, you can see that, right? Well, that's thoughts moving. Is that something? Is that thinking? What's your favorite item of clothing? You got brain cells for that. All of that's the past just representing itself, and that the mind representing things is what properly we call a decision. It's not a choice. It's not even thinking. The truth is, if most people said what they thought, they'd be speechless. It's just a decision. When we wake up to who we are, we start to source mind energy that the mind has never seen. Now we're functioning as humans. Until somebody does that, they're not even human. They're just playing out a program, playing out the past. You go back and you look at the Western scriptures. It says, look to the lives of the fathers, for ours are but a shadow of theirs upon the earth. We're just playing out the patterns of the generations. Forgiveness deletes the patterns of the generations and makes room for actual thinking, for us to actually source mind energy originally that's maybe never been seen in the world. And that's what we're designed to do. That's when life really starts, when we function as people who actually think and choose rather than just go by the old decisions from the generations, the generational patterns. You look at that story about the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years. You think about that. How do you get lost in a 35 square mile area for 40 years when you understand astronomy very well? I mean, that's silly. And what had to happen, if you read that story, what had to happen for them to get out of that desert, to get into what they called the promised land? To get out of the desert, they said the old generation has to die off. Now, to the root word generation is genare. It means cause. It doesn't mean everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. What they were saying is to get out of the unconscious state. The desert is just a code word for the unconscious. It wasn't about a 35 square mile sandy hot area. To get out of the unconscious. And what did they say had to happen? They said the old generation had to die. All of the causes held in the mind from the past have to be removed. And that's the core of this work. That's what we're here for.
That was really helpful. I'll move on to people being able to ask questions, because Maggie's first, if Maggie wants to ask a question.
Cool, let's go for it.
And if anyone else wants to ask a question, if you just raise your hand, and then I'll go around in the circle.
Hello, Michael. I have a question, basically. It's quite complicated, so I don't know. Basically, doing the worksheet, I came to certain things a few times, and I noticed that, you know, me, basically, and things which happen to me in life are very much rooted in the cause of looking to be, like, loved unconditionally. You know, because I have that void from my childhood.
Right.
And that requires, you know, giving people too many chances, you know, and basically, you know, putting myself in a vulnerable position to get hurt. So doing the worksheet, I came, you know, coming to the point, you know, and I cancel my need of being loved unconditionally. And okay, I can write it probably 1,000 times, but I will never kind of feel it. You know, my inside, my heart doesn't agree with that, and I don't know what to do. If this should be something I supersede with my self-love, or what should I do, you know, to solve that of my issue?
Well, the core, the number one step, remember, in forgiveness, is the canceling of a goal.
Yes.
So the first step there would be for you to cancel the need to be loved unconditionally.
Yes,
and
I wrote it, but I don't feel it, you know.
Right. Well, so this is probably going to be what we call your 77 times 70 issue. You know, 2,000 years ago when they said to Yeshua, how many of these darn worksheets do we have to do? Is 7 enough? Now, how many times should I forgive my brother? And the answer was no, 77 times 70. The Greeks translated it as 77 times 7, but it's 77 times 70, which literally means this is the core issue. I'm going to have to do this an infinite number of times until I'm complete with it. And so that's going to be the starting point. And here's what's going to happen. When you finally collapse the interference in your mind that you create by this desire for someone to love you unconditionally, when that finally drops, then you're going to get to experience life without your mind trying to interpret, fix, get, gain, whatever it is that you're trying to fix, get, or gain. And here's what will happen. You'll find out that it was all a false pursuit in the first place. Nobody, here's the best news I'll ever tell you, and probably the worst news I'll ever tell you. Nobody has ever loved you, and nobody's ever going to love you. You have never loved anyone. Nobody is, and you have never loved, never going to love anyone. Because love isn't something we do to each other. It's what we are. When somebody sets us on a false trek, we keep looking for the impossible, looking for the impossible, looking for the impossible, looking for the impossible. And of course, we never find it. So we go, oh, well, I guess I just don't deserve it. When I stop looking for that, then here's what I discover. What I'm looking for is what is looking. It's who I am. I am the active presence of love. But as long as my mind is screaming and raging about I need to have, and if fate, and if only, and I have so much sadness and so much pain and so much loss and so much, then I'm never going to get to taste myself as the human being that I'm created to be, and that is love. Now, one of the best ways I know to prove that to yourself, do you have any children?
Yes, I do. I have a daughter.
Okay. If you go back to the first time you held your daughter in your arms, I mean, actually think about the first time you held her, what position were you in? How were you holding her? Let your hands go into that position and imagine that you're holding her again for the first time. And everyone else is listening. If you've got that experience, just go back to that moment. And now, bypassing all of your own thoughts and feelings, allow yourself for a moment to tap into the essence of your daughter, her true being, her true essence. And if you tap into her essence, what word would you use to describe her essence?
For me, that was, I hold her and I just like melted. That was just like pure love,
There you go. Now, here's my question. Be with that pure love right now. Is she loving you or is she love?
Yeah, and I know you asked that question many times, but I think actually the correct answer is both, because it would be, in my opinion, different for the man, different for a woman, because the child grows in the woman's body, so the connection is there just from the beginning.
Yes. But my offering is, we talk in our cultural world about, oh, I love you. And what that really means is, as long as you're fulfilling all the goals I have for you, I approve of you. And if you stop doing that, think about somebody that, you've said before, I love you. And then notice the only time you're upset with them is when they're not fulfilling your goals. So is love when somebody's fulfilling your goals, or is that really love? My offering is what most people call love is just approval. And so that pure melting energy of love is what your daughter is. Your daughter wasn't looking at you and saying, hi, Mom, here I am as love. She was just being.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the truth about you too. But the world put all kinds of conditions on. Oh, you should have done this. Oh, you should do that. When you fulfill all of Mom's goals, when you fulfill all of Dad's goals, when you're a good girl, and all of a sudden mine gets in the way and we become overwhelmed by what we're not. And that blocks the experience of who we are.
Okay.
So now what needs to happen is we need to learn to forgive what we're not in order to get back to experiencing who we are.
Okay.
And when you come back to that experience of yourself being that pure presence of being that you experience with your daughter, then you'll know who you are.
Okay, well, because...
Good breath.
Yeah, that was hard breath. Because, as we spoke before, what I said, my grandma, who passed away when I was young, was the only person who loved me unconditionally, because my parents were very conditional. And I'm trying to be, and I feel like, 99.9% I am with my daughter, because even we argue and things like that, and she was like, oh, you don't love me anymore. I was like, I always say to her, that's not true. I love you anyway. It doesn't mean I'm always happy with your behavior, but I love you. That doesn't change it, So
my offering would be a much healthier conversation to have with your daughter would be to say, sweetie, right now, there's some goals I have for you and you're not achieving them. And that's bringing up hostility for me. And now it seems like I'm now pointing my hostility at you, which I am. But that's got nothing to do with the fact that you are love. That's the truth of who you are. Whatever I point at you, that's my problem. This is Mom's issue. I have my hostility. And last night when you were out late and you didn't tell me, and and then I found out you did this, all my disapproval stuff came up. And I'm working on cleaning up my disapproval of you. In the meantime, I want you to remember and I want you to know who you are as love. And that's exactly what I'm working on too as your mom. In fact, maybe we could work on this together. Tell you what, would you sit down, because I've had this issue too. Would you sit down and just hold the space for me? Just be that sweet presence of love that you are while I work through this worksheet on myself, not feeling like I'm loved. you might find you've got a very powerful ally in healing this wound that probably goes back many generations in your bloodline.
Because it's never like I love her in like any less or whatsoever. The only thing I said to her, I still love you the same way I did, but I'm just right now not very happy with, you know, what happened, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm not happy. Not like I'm not happy with her, but I'm not happy, you know. That makes me feel basically upset, you know.
But you notice that doesn't mean a thing to her. What means a thing to her is she's not experiencing the presence of you as love.
Mm-hmm.
And she interprets that through the same brain cells that you passed on to her, that you interpret it, that you're not loved. She interprets it as I'm not loved. And she's taking responsibility for what's going on with you. It's the same issue that you have with your parents. And, you know, it's one of the most common issues on the planet, and we need to be cleaning up because that's the original wound that most people suffer from their whole lives and never find a way to work through it. And so, you know, I suspect if you're typical, like most of us are, that we'd probably have to go back many generations to find one parent and one child who went through their whole childhood